Today we're going to rank all the versions of Lord of the Seas Poseidon who appears in movies, series, cartoons, games, and so on. These Poseidons are the ones you see on the screen, and the ranking goes from tier S, which is the best represented in my opinion, down to tier D, which is a bomb, a piece of junk. To clarify, I'll treat the Neptunes and Poseidons as the same, since that's how the media portrayed them, and I can't change that. Let's start here with the DC comics, where Poseidon is one of the various deities in DC based on the Greek god of the same name, and he's connected to several heroes that you can probably already imagine. For example, Wonder Woman is an Amazon, so she would definitely be connected to Poseidon and Aquaman. The beginning of his story in DC, at least the very start as far as I've seen, is exactly like the mythology. Thalia is the sister of Zeus and Hades, and she also ended up helping to defeat Kronos. When the Amazons managed to free themselves from slavery, which had been partly organized by Ares, the founders of the Amazonian people received help from Poseidon. He was very angry at the god of war, and that's why he opened the sea waters to create a path to Themyscira, allowing the Amazons to get there and escape from Ares. At another time, while Hawkman was fighting against some underwater creatures called Kogats, Poseidon helped to fight them. In another story, with the help of Proteus, Poseidon gained the ability to see the future and became interested in Mera, who is basically Aquaman's wife. Apparently, this Proteus gave Poseidon some time capsules so he could travel through time, and with that Poseidon kidnapped Mera, but Aquaman ended up taking one of those capsules and followed him. After all, he didn't want to lose his wife. Zeus then proposed a contest to retrieve a golden apple from the sea, offering Mera to the winner. And despite Poseidon's cheating, Aquaman ended up winning, but Poseidon didn't accept it that easily. Poseidon ended up taking Mera and escaped through time, but with Zeus's help, Aquaman and Aqualad followed him and saved Mera. And Poseidon himself was defeated by a creature created by her. After that, Poseidon ended up promising that he would change his ways, meaning he wouldn't kidnap anyone's wife anymore, which is obviously a lie if we're talking about the Poseidon from mythology, right? And after that, and other stories, Hades was defeated by Wonder Woman, and Poseidon was among the guys who celebrated it. Diana ended up dying or getting seriously injured there during the battle, and Zeus ordered Poseidon to take her to the depths so she could heal. At another time, Poseidon's gods met over Kronos' corpse and reviewed their pact. Now in the New 52, Poseidon reappears when Wonder Woman goes to the River Thames to talk to him. He appears in the form of a strange, hairy frog, and he senses that Zeus's blood is in Diana. But he ends up warning her that her lineage means nothing after Zeus's death. He also demands that she get out of the way. Recognizing Poseidon's right to the sky, Diana warns Hera that Poseidon has already claimed that domain, and Poseidon becomes furious, lifting Diana by the neck right there in front of the citizens who are watching the bridge. And he doubts that Hera really wants to take the throne of Olympus. And he promises to make her kneel if it's true. In other words, this story would basically be an adaptation of the story of the rebellion of Olympus, it seems. And Poseidon also ends up stating there that the world has already been divided among the three brothers, the sea, the sky, and the underworld. And the rest would kind of be leftovers for the other gods. Now he has the power to destroy these leftovers or leave them as they are, leaving it up to the other gods to decide. I actually think this Poseidon from DC is pretty cool. At least in terms of personality, he really reminds me of the Poseidon from mythology. Of course, depending on the writer in the comic, this can end up changing. And even Poseidon's design can end up changing. He might look like that classic design of a Greek god that most media uses, right? So, an older guy with a white beard. Or like in the classic story I told you about when he's kidnapping Mera. He shows up there with a black beard and looking younger. He has super speed, super strength, shape-shifting, immortality, and so on. The basic powers of a god. I'm going to put him around there. I think in B, I think that's a good spot because he's still missing something to be a better Poseidon. And if you like my channel, if you like this kind of video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share it too. That way, YouTube will promote the video more. If you can and want to help me even more, you can become a channel member, which will help me with everything I do and contribute to keeping this channel running. Thank you very much to all the channel members. And if you want to help me in another way, you can use the Amazon affiliate links that are in the description. Just click the link and search, or buy something that appears on your screen. A part of it goes to me and not to the billionaire Amazon. All right, or you can buy something that's showing up on the screen right now. Thank you so much. And in Marvel, we have Neptune, and at least from the research I've done, they actually combined Roman and Greek mythology. Because in this case, they show Neptune as being the brother of Zeus and Pluto, who is Hades. But in this case, it's Roman, and he has sisters Hera and Vesta. In this case, Vesta would be Hestia from Greek mythology. They also forgot to mention Ceres, or Demeter. And apparently Neptune would also be responsible for the evolution of certain beings, the Homo mermanus, or fishmen, also called mermen, if you prefer. And he would still be worshipped by the Atlanteans, unlike many other Olympians, who have few or no worshippers on Earth. And about 1,000 years ago, Neptune destroyed an Atlantean cult dedicated to the god Set. He supposedly lived among the Atlanteans for many years, acting as their protector. In modern times, Neptune sent Namor, who was the Submariner, basically Aquaman, but from Marvel, on a mission to recover his trident and to restore his right to the throne of Atlantis, appearing before him at various moments. After that, Neptune presented himself among the Atlanteans themselves, saying there that Namor would be the true ruler of the place. And also at that moment, he supposedly healed Namor and even transformed a regular horse into a giant seahorse because it was drowning in the waters. At another time, Neptune kidnapped Namor in Atlantis and took him to Hades at the request of Zeus, who blamed the Avengers for Hercules' poor physical condition. In other stories, after Zeus's death, Neptune and other Olympian gods returned to live on Earth. But since he was weakened, he was kidnapped by Hippolyta and her Amazons, following a plan by Hera and Pluto. They forced him to give up his shares in the group of Olympians, making it easier for the Amazon princess Artum to seize power. She also forced him to reveal the location of the Omphalos, which would be the stone that Cronus ate instead of Zeus. And in this case, the Omphalos actually exists in mythology. Neptune ended up being rescued by Hercules, Namor, and Namora. In the series shared here with you, I haven't read any comic book stories. I'm not sure about Poseidon or Neptune's personality in Marvel, but based on the story descriptions I've read here with you, it was missing a bit of that angry and furious Poseidon who acts before thinking in mythology. Of course, in this case, they also combine Neptune, who has a bit more awareness than Poseidon, let's say. But still, I'm going to leave this one at C, below DC's Poseidon. Now let's go to the Poseidon from Clash of the Titans, who was the middle brother between Zeus and Hades, also a son of Kronos. He and his brothers rebelled against their father after Kronos tried to kill them. And during this war, the gods worked together with the Cyclopes and built their powerful weapons. And it was at that time that Poseidon received his trident, which became his main weapon, and something very respected by mortals. Up to this point, everything's great, smooth sailing, but from here on out, it starts to get a little weird, because it says there that during the Titanomachy, Hades created a giant monster called Kraken to help the gods in the fight against the Titans. I'm talking about the Clash of the Titans from the 2000s. That's the one I watched. Well, then Poseidon and his brothers used their weapons and powers together to defeat Kronos. And after that, Kronos was imprisoned in the underworld, and Poseidon became the god of the seas. The movies don't go into detail, but it's likely that he divided the world with his brothers, maybe by drawing lots. Just like in some versions of mythology, when Zeus created humans and ordered them to worship the gods, Poseidon became even more powerful. But Zeus left Hades out on purpose. He ordered Hades to stay imprisoned in the underworld. Poseidon's reaction is unclear, but he may have ignored it since he was content with his new power. And here we also have that famous story about Poseidon being responsible for attacking Medusa, and then Athena turning her into a terrible monster. But actually it was Neptune who did that, not Poseidon in mythology, at least not as a god. Poseidon was one of the most powerful gods on Olympus when humans still worshipped many gods. His power was almost equal to Zeus's. Even when weakened as people stopped praying, he was still very strong, strong enough to escape the underworld when he was attacked by the Makai, something not even Zeus could have done. He could throw lightning with his trident, control tides, teleport, and likely cause earthquakes as in mythology. As the sea god, he knew everything about navigation. Even Hephaestus said he learned to navigate from Poseidon. His personality changes a bit. In the first movie, he is more explosive, more quarrelsome, But in the second, he appears calmer and starts to support Zeus in the attempt to restore the order that will protect humanity. Exactly the personality of Poseidon in mythology, because in fact, he reflects the seas, which are sometimes calm and sometimes very agitated. Now, Poseidon, from the Disney movie Hercules in this case, he's a very minor character in the movie. And as always, they did the basics. He's the brother of Zeus and Hades, and even though he doesn't get much attention in the movie, he has a much bigger role in the animated series that's based on this story. Physically, Poseidon is shown as a humanoid being with a fish-like appearance, and he's also blue. I think it's important to mention he has fins instead of hair, a droopy white mustache, and a beard that also looks like fins. His eyes are green, and he only wears a dark green chiton. As a god, Poseidon is extremely powerful, on the same level as Zeus. Apparently he's immortal, can shapeshift, can teleport, and has heightened senses beyond normal. And since he's the god of the sea, he can also breathe underwater, talk to sea creatures, and completely control the ocean using his trident. In the Hercules movie, Poseidon appears at the party celebrating Hercules' birth, and years later he and the other gods end up imprisoned by Hades and the Titans, but they're freed by Hercules, who saves everyone. In the animated series, Poseidon appears much more. The family usually calls him Popo. No joke, that's really what happens. Popo, and he likes that nickname. In one of the episodes, Hades tries to trick Poseidon into moving the river Styx to Greece, which would give Hades control of Olympus.
Hey man, have I ever told you how I invented the marine mammal?
Yes, Poseidon, 1,000,000 times. In another episode, Poseidon introduces Hercules to his son Triton, who wants to go to Prometheus Academy. Triton is kind of clumsy and tries to be like Hercules, but ends up causing problems by taking his father's note and accidentally releasing the sea monster. In the end, Hercules and Triton defeat the creature together, and Poseidon decides not to punish his son. In another story, he gets upset about being left out and organizes a big boat race in his honor during the events. Hercules ends up saying that he is greater than the god of the sea himself. This makes Poseidon furious, to the point of releasing a creature called Charybdis in the middle of the race. In the end, Icarus is the only one who truly deserves it and wins the Poseidon Cup, while Hercules learns a lesson in humility. This Poseidon is pretty silly, right? A more childish Poseidon. I think maybe it deserves a D, maybe a C. Now let's move on to One Piece, where we have King Neptune, which I don't know exactly how to pronounce because I've never watched One Piece. That's my bad. Well, he would be a fishman of the coelacanth type and rules the Ryugu Kingdom on Fishman Island. And he is the father of Ufokoboshi, Ryuboshi, Mamboshi, and Shirahoshi. He was married to Queen Otohime, who has already died, just for context. Neptune is huge and very strong. He has a red nose, small eyes, orange curly hair, and a long beard. His chest and arms are covered in hair. He usually walks around shirtless, and he has spiral-shaped tattoos on both arms. As a king, he wears a golden crown that looks like a tulip and a well-crafted golden trident. At Otoheime's funeral, he appeared wearing a large suit. Now, about his personality. Neptune tends to be direct and a bit clumsy. He doesn't stand on ceremony much and even shouts things for no reason, including his own name. The secret behind his shout comes from a whale named Hoi. He also gets names wrong sometimes, like calling Zoro Zori, for example. Sometimes he's distracted and irresponsible, leaving the castle on impulse and getting scolded by his ministers. Well, even though he's a bit eccentric, Neptune knows how to be serious when he needs to. For example, when the Straw Hats were accused of kidnapping mermaids, he decided to capture them. But he thought it was unfair to arrest them just because of a prediction. He has changed a lot since his youth. He used to be vengeful, but now he is more merciful. So, for being a Poseidon in quotes in the One Piece universe, I think we can put him in C. Maybe if he wasn't a fishman. Because Poseidon, surprisingly, wasn't a fishman in mythology. He had legs. And maybe he was a bit more explosive. I was about to put him in B. Now let's move on to SpongeBob. Yes, we have Poseidon in SpongeBob. Actually, we have 3. We have one that's more designed for the series, which is King Neptune. And we have King Neptune from the first SpongeBob movie, which I watched many times when I was a kid. The only thing I remember about him is that he was bald.
And SpongeBob was a mermaid. He was a
Merman. If I'm not mistaken, Plankton had taken his crown and sold it to someplace there. And King Neptune went completely crazy. He was paranoid about being bald and threatened everyone if his crown wasn't returned. This animated series King Neptune, with a cartoonish design, is the same character. Now there's King Poseidon from the new SpongeBob movie, which I think is called The Great Rescue or something like that. This one only exists in the spin-off. He's terrible. I don't like him at all. I'll put him in D. Now King Neptune himself, I'll put him in C, I think, because, well, it's fine, but he needs to be a bit more explosive and more vengeful. But you can't expect too much from SpongeBob. He has that merman form, which I don't really like, but just like I said about One Piece, I'll say it here too. I think it's a good adaptation for the SpongeBob universe. Now, moving to the Little Mermaid universe, we have something interesting. The Kingdom of Atlantis with a king, who in theory would be Poseidon. But the king here in the Little Mermaid is King Triton, even though he's based on Poseidon. Triton in mythology is the son of Poseidon. And here, he kind of has the form of a mermaid, his Triton form, right? He's huge. He's married to Queen Athena and is the father of 7 daughters. Aquata, Andrina, Arista, Athena, Adela, Alana, and Ariel. His biggest enemy here is Ursula, who is a sea witch. In the past, she was part of King Triton's court, but she ended up being banished from the kingdom. Since then, she's been looking for a way to get revenge on him. I didn't really understand why they named him Triton. I don't know why they didn't use, Neptune or Poseidon. You can't really ignore that, right? So I'll just leave it as it is. He's not that explosive. He's a bit strict at times, but in the past, he was more loving, so I didn't really mind, one way or another. I'll put him in D. Now let's move on to Percy Jackson, which may feature the most well-known version of Poseidon in popular media. He's a Greek god of the seas, storms, earthquakes, droughts, floods, and horses. As always, he's the son of Kronos and Rhea, and he's one of the big 3 alongside Zeus and Hades, and his Roman equivalent is Neptune. In the Percy Jackson universe, he's the patron god of Corinth and of Cabin 3 at Camp Half-Blood. Come on. Sally Jackson describes Poseidon as tall, handsome, imposing, but at the same time with a calm air. And he usually dresses simply, wearing sandals, shorts, a Hawaiian shirt, and a fisherman's cap. When he wants to impress, he wears bright green clothes and even crowns made of shells. His appearance shifts with his kingdom's state, especially when the sea is chaotic. He may appear aged and tired, and when he is strong, he comes back looking more handsome, striking, and younger. Poseidon is Percy Jackson's father, and both share sea green eyes and black hair. Percy inherited some of his father's charisma. I'd love to know what kind it is and where it came from. And even though he's proud and stubborn, Poseidon is a more balanced god than Zeus and more patient. And here we already have a problem, right? Because Poseidon isn't really like that. He really cares about his children and tries to guide them whenever possible. And he has a dramatic side when he's sad, and his temper can be dangerous, like when he punished Cassiopeia for insulting the Nereids, or when he took revenge on Minos, which ended up leading to the birth of the Minotaur. Despite the fights and differences, Poseidon is usually more reasonable than the other gods, and he gets along relatively well with Ares, rarely holds grudges against demigods, and never blames Annabeth for the relationship with Percy, unlike his rivalry with Athena in mythology. And he's also very protective, and Percy is considered his greatest weakness because hurting him would weaken the god himself. Well, as you can see here, people usually say that Poseidon is calmer than the other gods, which isn't exactly true, right? But I like this idea that the sea reflects Poseidon, which actually makes sense. And I like the references to mythological stories. They look for explanations for these mythological stories, even though Medusa's story isn't reflected all that accurately. And we always remember Percy Jackson's Poseidon, right? Even I, who don't really like Percy Jackson, whenever someone mentions Poseidon, I think of that work. So I'll put it in A, but it still needs a little more. Now let's move on to the Poseidon from Blood of Zeus, and I really like the representation of this Poseidon here. Actually, I really like almost all the representations from Blood of Zeus. I think they're really well done. First, because look at Poseidon's appearance. Even though he has a beard to show that he's more mature, older, he still looks younger than most other representations. So it creates a really cool balance. Zeus from Blood of Zeus is like that too. Plus, they capture Poseidon's temperament well, right? Because he starts the story there against Zeus. In fact, They even have a fight at a certain point when the gods end up catching Zeus interfering in the stories of mortals there. He even takes part in a way in a rebellion against Zeus, but then he completely switches sides and ends up supporting Zeus. In the second or third season, I can't remember now, I think it's the second, right at the end, there's a really cool scene where he arrives with the waves and everything, attacking everyone and putting an end to a fight that was going on there. And there's the story of them defeating Cronus and the Titans. In fact, at the end of the last season, he takes part again in a battle against Cronus together with Zeus, and with Hades as well, of course. I'll put it in S because I just love Blood of Zeus. Now let's move on to Record of Ragnarok. If I love Blood of Zeus, I have a huge problem with Poseidon in Record of Ragnarok because to me, he doesn't give off any idea of being Poseidon, except for the fact that he carries a trident and his name is Poseidon because he's blonde. He wears kind of a different outfit there. I don't even know if it's medieval. I don't know what that outfit is. He doesn't use water powers. He doesn't use thunder powers. He doesn't use earthquake powers. He just uses his trident to attack Sasaki there as if it was, I don't know. He's called the most feared among the gods, though that's not in mythology. Also, the tale of him killing his brother Adamus doesn't exist. So for me, it's D. Okay, now let's move on to Knights of the Zodiac. And anyone who already watches my tier list videos about representations of gods, deities, etc., knows very well about my problem with Knights of the Zodiac, where usually all the characters look pretty similar and don't really follow mythology that much. However, I think Poseidon actually stands out a little bit from the others because at least he has different hair. He has kind of bluish hair there. And from what I understood about his story, there are actually some cool things and some interesting mythological references, like his problem with Athena, because apparently this Poseidon has a certain envy of his brother's domains, of Hades, who ruled the underworld, and of the gods who ruled the heavens. And then when the gods showed a certain preference for Athena and put humanity in her care, Poseidon went after her, starting the so-called Holy War. But even so, despite liking these references and the somewhat different look of Poseidon compared to the other characters, if you take away Poseidon's trident, just like Schumatt's runs, it's kind of hard to say that this character is Poseidon. He wears a more medieval armor and doesn't have a black beard, nothing like that. I think he deserves a C ranking. And now let's go to the Assassin's Creed universe, where in Poseidon's case, he's part of a race of beings that are kind of an advanced civilization that has been on Earth for a long time. In other words, they're not really gods at all, which actually brings this Poseidon down a notch. However, his look here is excellent. It's actually much better than the Norse gods in Assassin's Creed. One interesting thing about this Poseidon here is that he was inspired by Plato's Poseidon, which actually focuses a lot on the city of Atlantis. But because of this thing about ancient beings that aren't really gods, I'll put him in A. And now let's move on to these two main ones here, the one from Age of Mythology and the one from Smite. And for me, these two are the best representations of Poseidon that I've seen. These two here are basically the same Poseidon from mythology, just taken from there and put into the game. In fact, Smite's lore even mentions the competition between Athena and Poseidon for the city of Athens. And look at this cool thing. Both Poseidons have legs and not like a mermaid tail or anything. So for me, both of them go in as Poseidon is the god of the seas, earthquakes, and horses, and he's also known as the Earth Shaker. And in the game Hades, he gives blessings that greatly increase Zagreus' damage and make his attacks push enemies back. These pushes can throw monsters against the walls and traps in the game. He's also one of the few gods whose blessings help you gain more resources, something that only Dionysus also does. Poseidon kind of has a loud and cool uncle vibe, and he treats Zagreus like a beloved nephew. He was also one of the first gods to support him when he found out about his existence. Even though he's laid back, he can cause tsunamis and show an explosive side, like both Zeus and Hades, when he gets angry. He's not very delicate with his words, and is always getting into other people's business without realizing it. Once, when he saw Aphrodite and Zagreus together, he made a mischievous comment that made the goddess really furious. He also finds Theseus annoying, which is funny because almost everyone thinks that about him too. All the gods often make fun of him behind his back, as if he's that nice guy friend, but kind of inconvenient. Even so, he has good qualities. He tries to get closer to his nephews and treats Zagreus with special affection. He doesn't like being in Zeus's shadow, but he remains straightforward, sincere, and always ready to help. Athena even says that Poseidon was the first to take on his role over the sea without hesitation. So, the Poseidon in the Hades game is actually pretty nice. He has a different design, it's cool and original, but it's not really mythologically accurate. This Poseidon is pretty youthful, even though he has a big beard. The Poseidon from God of War basically has the same origin story as always. He's the son of Kronos, swallowed by him, brother of Zeus and Hades, and the ruler of the seas. They made some really cool references to Poseidon's mythology, like the hippocamps, for example, which were responsible for pulling Poseidon's chariot in mythology. In this case, the hippocamps in God of War are those giant horses holding Gaia during his fight in God of War 3. And, as we know, God of War gives Poseidon two forms. That giant water form of his, which is a reference to the ocean from Greek mythology. You can even tell because of those little horns he has, and the regular Poseidon, who also has legs, which is already a pretty significant point here. But man, for me, even as a fan of the series, I think this Poseidon battle is kind of disappointing. Because after you take him out of that giant form, he just gets humiliated, man. He doesn't do anything else.
Mas pelas referências e tudo mais, eu vou deixar ele em...
If you liked the video, please like, subscribe, and share. Do you agree or disagree with me? Did I miss any Poseidon? Let me know in the comments.